You've done well to come here. I welcome you. Country of arcane magic, Svalin. Slightly away from the palace that was in the middle of the country, there existed a small estate that the Wisdom King Migraz resided in. That was the first destination for SEI's group. First location they absolutely had to visit in this journey to get close to the pinnacle called the Demon King and the Supreme Ruler. The master of the estate, the elven living legend, the Wisdom King Migraz was forced to live the remainder of his life on a wheelchair due to the side effect he suffered from the battle 200 years ago. Even then, it was possible to feel a certain strong pressure being given off by him just by him being there. SEI's group was guided towards a room inside the estate and gestured to sit on a simple yet well-made chair that was made using alchemy. Having the living legend in front of them, even the bold and hard-headed individuals of SEI's group could not completely hide their nervousness as everyone tried to sit down whilst making as little sound as possible. However, for some reason, the Sword Saint sat on the ground and curled himself into a ball. He did not know what etiquette was. Self-centered and whimsical, those were the traits associated with feline creatures. SEI and Cruz were troubled by the act that overly portrayed freedom. However, the ever-magnanimous and cheerful Migraz merely laughed it off calmly. "Ah, I don't mind it. Make yourself at home. You guys also don't have to be that nervous. Even though I'm called the Wisdom King, I'm someone that's long stepped down from the seat of power." Depending on the other side, the impudent act of the tiger was something that could result in them getting arrested on the spot. However, it seemed Migraz did not mind it. Perhaps it was as expected of one of the heroes. They were used to eccentric and quirky oddball personalities. Or perhaps, because the 7 heroes were full of weird and eccentric people, the actions of the tiger was nothing more than a cute act for them. "Now then, some the reason you have sought me was out to find a method to become stronger." "Yes. We have come in search of the method to boost SEI Dano here, who have come from a different world, to level 1000. We thought that as someone who had once reached that realm in the past, the Wisdom King Sama might know a method." To Migraz's question, Cruz answered. In his voice, you could still detect some nerves. Most likely, it was influenced by the fact that they were both elves. "Yes, I did indeed reach that realm once in the past. No, if it was 200 years ago, it was not just me but many individuals that stepped foot into that realm. If you look back on it now, it truly was a golden age for the humanoids. Never in the entire history was the power of the humanoids that high. We would appreciate if you could reveal that secret formula once again, and use it for the hero." "Secret formula, huh? Do you mind if I ask why you believe such a thing exists?" Method on how Migraz and the others once reached level 1000. Cruz just now called that secret formula. There were never any story or evidence which suggested that Migraz had used anything of that sort. Although it sounded as if it was mere speculation, if you were to read between the lines and speak bluntly, it was as if he was directly being asked, "You didn't follow the proper and correct way and used some fraud, didn't you?" But even then, they were sure that there was a special something that was being hidden from them. And for this particular point, SEI was of the same opinion. The reason was because, without a special technique of some sort, it was almost impossible to reach that realm of level 1000. In this world, the method for getting stronger was very simple. And it was to kill another living thing. According to the book that Migraz had once published, every living thing to some degree had mana inside their bodies, whether it was a small or large amount. Furthermore, mutation of the living thing was also caused by the existence of mana, and the stronger the body, the more of this mana it stored. By killing and stealing the mana from another living thing, one was able to become stronger. That was the true form of the phenomenon called level up. In other words, mutation and leveling up were fundamentally the same thing. The only difference was whether the living thing transformed into a different creature or retained its form and become stronger. Migraz himself wrote at the end of his book as followed, "The creature who had continually leveled up and absorbed mana is able to pass on a part of that onto a future generation, whereby eventually will reach a point of transformation called the mutation." As such, putting it in a simple term, one merely had to continue fighting. If one continued to kill the magical beast and the demons, they will get stronger whether they wanted to or not. However, there was a major problem with this. That's because, if one were to grow normally, there just isn't enough mana, experience points, around to be able to reach that point. All one had to do to level up was to increase the mana that was stored inside of their bodies. However, the amount of mana required for the next level was not consistent. For example, let's assume that an individual was able to increase their level to level 2 by defeating one magical beast. However, if a level 10 individual wanted to become level 11, they would need to defeat many tens of that same magical beast. If one were to graph the amount of mana required to level up, the ratio of mana required for a single level will go up as you continue to level up. And by the time one reached a 3-digit level, the amount of mana required for the single level became too astronomical to specify. 200 years ago, even before the rise of an individual called Rupas, there was the vampire princess Bennett Nash who was believed to be the strongest in the world. She had spent over 100 years in conquering an entire continent by killing every single magical beast on it and literally building a mountain of corpses. If one were to call killing the magical beasts the proper way to level up, there was no one better than her who faithfully followed this method. Longevity and the near absolute dominance and power of the vampire race. Only then, it was made possible for the entire continent worth of magical beast to be annihilated. But even then, her level at the time was merely 600. It was still far from the level 1000 position. Then all she needs to do is go crush another continent. One might think in such a way, however, it was not that simple. As it was previously mentioned, the amount of mana required for the subsequent level up only went up exponentially. As such, even if she were to annihilate another continent, her level would only reach around level 700. Level 1000 was a realm that was set by the G.O.Dis, and to reach there meant that you were entering the domain of a deity. However, the journey to reach that point was filled with struggle, thus it was not a point that was possible to be reached easily. If one were to try and reach this point using the proper method, then they would at least need to kill every living creature on Midgard other than themselves. If you looked at the battle between the Demon King and Rupas, it was obvious. Level 1000s were no longer what could be called a living creature, but a transcendent being which could utterly destroy the world in a short amount of time. An individual capable of facing off against the world alone. As such, to reach that state, they had the need to eat the entire world. Level up was not a simple work that the current Rupas believed it to be. Magical beasts infinitely respa.w.n, so just keep killing them. Such a thing was only possible because it was inside the game, and it was not a viable method in this world. Nevertheless, 200 years ago, what was impossible was made possible. Even the human race, which had short lifespan, was able to step foot onto the realm of level 1000. It was clearly strange. It was hard to believe they reached that point using the proper method. There has to be something. A loophole that was given by the G.O.Dis. A hope and a way out for the humanoids who have been driven into the corner. If you were to ask if there's something else, it indeed exists. However, before I answer that, let me make a question of my own. What do you guys think of the G.O.Dis who had created this world? Although Migres asked in a calm manner, his eyes were sharp. There was no one in that room who could understand the underlying meaning of that question on the spot. After a few seconds of silence, only SEI could faintly pick up the true meaning behind Migres' query. At the same time, SEI was also able to figure out why Migres had sent those golems to his group. I see. This person is. Migres must have noticed the change in SEI's facial expression. Although he did not say anything, inside of himself, the evaluation of the boy who came from another world was raised. Of course, she's the great omnipotent creation G.O.Dis and the mother to us all. She's the symbol of absolute justice, the law of this world, and the very guidance of the world itself. I see. A very model answer as expected from an acolyte. I've understood well now. For you guys, let's follow what you've called it and say the secret formula. I cannot pas.s on the secret formula. Wha? How come? Because you do not understand. Just like in the past. Just as I did not back in the past. Migres' tone was still as calm and pleasant as before. However, His eyes were so sharp that it clearly conveyed the message that there was nothing more to say. An unexpected refusal of cooperation from the hero. In response, Gantz's face stiffened and Cruz's face made an expression of despair. On the other hand, Friedrich yawned as if he was not involved in all of this. I'm begging you to read the atmosphere, stupid tiger. It can't be. However, you over there. I think your name was SEI, wasn't it? I would like to have a conversation with you. I apologize, but can I get everyone other than him to stand up and leave the room? If Migres had told everyone leave, perhaps Cruz would have persevered a bit more. Notwithstanding, even if it was just a single person, the fact that they were permitted to remain behind gave hope to Cruz, causing his words to be pushed back down. There was a consolation in knowing that not everyone had been abandoned by the Wisdom King. If anything, there was a chance that by being overly persistent, they would all be chased out from that place altogether. After a short deliberation, Cruz, by making eye contact with SEI, conveyed the message, please, I'll leave things to you. Understood. We will be stepping down. Let's go, everyone. They could not understand what they did wrong. However, the final result showed they did not pass as the Wisdom King's judgment. It was as simple as that. Everyone other than SEI reluctantly left the room and the vice-captain who was last to leave dragged the tiger along with him. Finally, the only ones to be left in the room was SEI and Migres. Now then, SEI-kun. I will ask you the same question again. What is your opinion of the G.O.dis? I really don't know well. I just simply don't know enough about this world to be able to answer that question. But, I think she stinks a little. It was an opinion that would never have been uttered by a person of this world. It was a statement of unparalleled blasphemy towards the image of the creation G.O.dis. It was a statement that could only be made because he was an alien that came from another world. Even Migres narrowed his eyes with interest and awaited SEI's next words. When we first went out on a journey, we heard the Demon King say something. That, the G.O.dis as well was involved in the strange battle between the 7 heroes and Ruppas that happened 200 years ago. Of course, it's not like I believe everything the Demon King said, but I agree with him that there were some strange aspects to it. That's why I came here to ask you. To ask whether the battle from 200 years was really what you guys wished or not. You came across the Demon King. I'm surprised that you guys are fine. It seemed he didn't even put us in his sight. As Migres pondered and thought about what was said, he crossed his arms. After being told as such, it seemed he was able to recall something. The color of his face could not be said to be good by any means. I have no intention of making any excuse this late. It's an unchangeable fact that I betrayed my friend 200 years ago. Nevertheless, I will also admit we were too impulsive. As a result of losing their greatest threat called Ruppas, the demons took the opportunity and took charge, leading us to the current state of the world. It's strange, but it's really hard for a person to come to understand oneself. 200 years ago, I was scared of Ruppas and let go of my hand which was holding onto her sleeve. I'm not sure if that was an action I took due to my real feelings or the result of being induced by someone. I'm not able to make that judgment myself. At the very least, I was clearly aware of what I was doing and did not feel like I was being manipulated by someone. Migres did not stop after saying this. There was pain and bitterness on his face as if he was a sinner that was forced to face their own sin. If I think about it, everyone was indeed acting weirdly at the time. Mizar, Alioth, Fekta, Dubhi, Merak. Everyone had their own thoughts about Ruppas. Envy, jealousy, fear, competition. There's no doubt that everyone had some form of feeling that made them feel that they had lost against Ruppas in some way. But at the time, that feeling was too prominent. As if it was amplified, everyone couldn't feel anything but defeat. Looking back on it, maybe I was also the same. Only Bennett Nash managed to stay normal without acting strangely. Memory manipulation, amplification of emotions, or maybe even mind control. In any event, to be able to manage any of that without being noticed by the target, it was clear how powerful the person had to be. But SEI had already made his belief, his conviction. Most likely, not just Migres and the other heroes, but the entire world. He was already convinced that every living thing was induced and influenced by the G.O.Dis. That they were under the control of the G.O.Dis. Because, it was just weird. There was a thing like status with a limitations like level. There existed magical beasts and demons. And the humanoids were suffering whilst the G.O.Dis did nothing, yet. No one felt any absurdness from the whole situation. Furthermore, there was a strangeness and suspiciousness to the fact that demons had yet to annihilate the humanoids. If the demons had put their minds to it, the humanoids should have long perished. At the very least, the Demon King had the power to make that happen. Yet, the demons had not managed to erase the humanoids. Not only that, the average level of the demons had decreased as if they were matching with the humanoids. In the past, it was overflowing with level 1000s, right? And the demons and the magical beasts were strong enough to be able to retaliate against them, right? But for some reason, they no longer had that. As if they were matching up with the humanoids, they could now be scattered by the level 120 Sword Saint? Even the 7 luminaries that he heard about in the stories were around level 300, the quality had clearly gone down far too much. Similar to the cat playing around with the mouse, even though the humanoids were suffering, the other party held back to just a degree so that annihilation would not occur. That was the image of this world painted by SEI in his mind. Wisdom King Sama, I want to hear it from your mouth. Rupa's Maffle is not an enemy, right? That's why you stuck the golems with us. So that, in case of 1 in a million chance, if we made a mistake and managed to corner her, they would hinder us. Although it was impossible with our actual abilities, it would become questionable which way things would roll if the G.O.Dis interfered. It's exactly as you say. I no longer think of her as an enemy. No, even back then. The methods she used might have been cruel, but she was an ally that wished for the freedom and peace of the humanoids from the bottom of her heart. Even though she was an ally. Wisdom King Sama. Seeing the Migres who looked like he would start crying any moment, SEI stood up and spoke. The reason he was called to this world was most likely to defeat the Demon King and Rupas. However, he could no longer fulfill that role, nor did he have the intention to do so. At least one of them. He understood well that to defeat Rupas equated to tightly squeezing his own neck. In that case, there was something else that he had to do. There had to be another road that he should have sought. Please fight together with me. I'm still weak and I still don't know anything about this world and I don't even have the resolution to fight and but, even then, I wish to stop it. To not fire at the predetermined target, but to stop the individual who's forcing that onto another. That's why I need your cooperation. SEI and Migres talked. The enemy that he had to fight existed elsewhere. The target of his gun must never be wrong. Exactly, the person that his party should fight, was not Rupa's Maffle. __. We explored Blutgong while we waited for Dina and Libra to return. If I had to sum up my impression of the location in one word, it would have to be magnificent. Although it was an artificial land which was created inside the giant golem, as long as one did not stare at the ceiling for too long, it was very possible that they would start to forget that they were inside a golem. No, let me say it frankly. It was scary. I did not think that they had already evolved from living in caves to this point. Notwithstanding that inside of the city gave off an olden feeling, to have such a city inside the limited S.P.A.ce like this reminded me of the robot anime I watched in the past, which showcased a S.P.A.ce colony. In this world, it seemed the race that was closest to the modern age and most fantasy-like were the dwarves. If they were given a few hundred more years, it was very possible that there would not be much difference between the inside of Blutgong and the modern age. Some there would soon be things like traffic lights and cars in this world. If I was to talk about cars, I suppose there was already one that existed in this world, the Tanaka that I had created. Whilst I was thinking along those lines and loitering around the city, I noticed that there were multiple footsteps that were heading towards our location. I guessed the distance to be approximately 300 m. Although I was not at the level of Libra, my hearing was still quite good. Compared to a human, the strides were smaller and felt almost dull or barefooted. There would be no mistake to assume that all of the footsteps belonged to dwarves. In support of that assumption, what appeared from the corner of the intersection, turning towards us, were around 5 dwarves that was wearing workers' clothes. Rather than dwarves, with the way they looked, they were just a couple of uncles from the construction or warehouse facilities. I felt the stereotypical image of dwarves that donned armors inside of my head collapse. Oh, she's here. Is there no mistake it's that charming young lady? Yeah, there's no mistake. It's not every day you get to see a beauty like that. I'm not going to make a mistake. Seeing the change in the expression of the dwarf platoon that started heading towards me, my vigilance amped up a gear. From the conversation that I overheard, it was clear they were searching for me. Furthermore, they even stated that there would be no mistake based on my appearance. This was not looking too good. Using the disguise I was gifted by Migres, I currently had my wings hidden. Additionally, I had also changed the hairstyle and was wearing GLA.S.SES. Notwithstanding, the face itself was not hidden and the appearance of Rupas was extremely eye-catching. Thinking that the lifespan of the dwarves was short and that there was no photographs in this world, I had assumed that there would be no dwarf that would know how I looked like, but it seemed I had made a blunder. With this level of technology, it would not be strange that there was something that resembled a camera. Since I did not like wearing that full-body bondage play disguise, I came out wearing the current disguise, but it seemed I was too careless. Oh well, whatever. It was just a simple mistake that would be easily corrected with my battle prowess. I lightly loosened my knuckle joints and used the observing eyes on the dwarves to check their level. Their prowess equaled to those of level 20 to 40. If it was me, I could literally knock them all out in a blink of an eye. By deliberating my consciousness to enter into a battle, I was able to slow down the sense of time, turning the movement of dwarves into slow motion. And by further concentrating my consciousness to put myself in a state ready for battle, it was possible for me to fight, react, and attack in the smallest gap in a time frame that could practically be considered an instant. That was what I had noticed from the recent battle with the Demon King. In all likelihood, I would be able to knock them out before they could even become aware of anything. There was simply that much difference in our specs. If they were to show even a slightest intention to attack, I will take them down. Wait, please, Rapasama. I can't feel any hostility from those people. However, Virgo pulled my consciousness back from a state that was in full combat mode. Her words caused my mind to rapidly cool down, returning my perception of time to that of an ordinary state. Shortly thereafter, the group of dwarves arrived in front of me with an all too obvious smile that contained not a single speck of hostility. Yo, I was looking for you. You were that chick that came in a box like golem made out of steel, right? Look, it's me. I'm the one that accepted your golem at the entrance. Apologies, I can't distinguish your face. The middle-aged dwarf pointed at himself and said as such. However, putting things bluntly, I could not distinguish the dwarves apart at all. Well, if I were to look at things properly, I could sort of see that there were some differences between each of their faces. But these 5. Or rather, were all the dwarf men like this? All the distinguished H.I plus and G parts of the face were overlapping with each other's. Thick eyebrows, big nose, and a needlessly long beard. Additionally, they all had stern facial expressions. As if I would know. Even worse, they were all wearing the same colored workers' clothes. At the very least, change the color. If Ma ___O and Lu ___Gi wore the same colored clothing, it would be hard to distinguish them too. Tisk, this is why the outsiders are. Hey, look carefully. I'm clearly the most handsome one in the bunch. What are you talking about? You just look like a grandpa. 3 That's right, that's right. I'm the handsome one. I can't tell them apart at all. They might have been able to tell each other apart, however, from my perspective, all I saw were 5 identical individuals causing a ruckus. If they had shaved their beards, I would at least have been able to clearly see their facial features properly. You know, how do I put it? I suppose I'll at least listen to what you have to say. Oh, that's right, I forgot. The golem you came riding in, that thing was really magnificent. A small mobile golem that carries people are already being put to use in this Bletgong, but it's the first time I've seen something perfected to that degree. Not to mention, the interior had been turned into a dwelling s.p.a.ce. It's perfect for a long journey. That thing's an innovation. Can you tell me who it was that built it and where they're at? It seemed these guys neither had noticed my real identity nor had any hostility towards me. Their craftsman's soul was simply lit on fire after seeing Tanaka, and so they came to find me. Well, this was Embarrass.s.sing. I wanted to smack myself in the head for the way I was thinking just a moment ago. If they were to show even a slightest intention to attack, I will take them down. Awkward. For it was fortunate that I did not say that out loud. If I had done so, it definitely would have become a dark spot in my history. I was really glad Virgo had stopped me. Or more like, what was this? I was being so aggressive without even thinking about it. For some reason, the way I was thinking recently had become quite dangerous. If it's that thing, I made it. But was that really something to be surprised about? If you're talking about a PAS.Singer golem that you can board into, there's already a super high CLA.S.S one called Bletgong. Well, of course, Bletgong is the pinnacle of alchemy. It's impossible there'll be something better than this. But Bletgong is an ultimate creation of the Smith King. It's not something that we can imitate. There's just simply no comparison. On the other hand, if it's that thing that you came riding on, if we try and understand the mechanics behind how it was built, even we can ma.s.s produce it. That's why I called it innovation. To my question, the middle-aged dwarf answered proudly. There was no mistake that in the boarding type golems, Bletgong was of a highest CLA.S.S golem. The height of 300 m and length of 1100 m, a supreme non-standard sized creation. Furthermore, you could board tens of thousands, or even a few 100,000 people if you wanted to push it. Without a doubt, it was a golem without comparison. One would not have to hesitate in calling it the world's greatest invention. However, if one were to ask if you could ma.s.s produce that, the answer would be no. Some weird structure which made absolutely no sense could only be made because it was Mizar. Let alone the current generation's dwarves, even I would not be able to replicate it. Whereas, if it was Tanaka, as long as one understood the framework, it could be easily reproduced. At the very least, it would be so for the alchemists. Needless to say, there were boarding-type golems that existed in this world. Nevertheless, Tanaka was modeled after a modern car, thus the interior comfort and stability were completely different. In all likelihood, the self-driving golems in this world were comparable to a self-moving horse-drawn carts without the horse. So here's an idea, what don't you let us inspect that thing a little? We'll pay you handsomely, and once it starts being ma.s.s produced, we don't mind putting your name as the inventor. In Bletgong, there's this thing called patent. Unlike the other countries, the initial inventor properly gets their respect and money associated with the product. We'll need permission to copy it, and when it is copied, the initial inventor gets the appropriate amount of money. So how about it? It's not such a bad deal, right? I pondered a little about the middle-aged dwarf's suggestion. There was nothing inside Tanaka that I would be troubled with if it was reproduced. However, if it was a real car, it would be overloaded with things like fuel and engine, which would be too much advanced technology for this world. However, Tanaka was only a golem with an appearance of a car. Notwithstanding that it was fitted with things like rubber tires and suspensions, if you considered the technical skills of the dwarves, it was not a technology that was greatly advanced. There were no items that would trouble me if it was inspected, and even in the worst-case scenario where they decide to dismantle Tanaka into pieces, I could put it back to the current state. Furthermore, if the skills of the dwarves could improve with this, it was favorable to the humanoids. I suppose, it's not such a bad idea? Well, yeah. I don't mind. Inspect it however you wish. But, you wouldn't mind if I was also at the location, would you? Of course not, why would I? If you, the creator of that thing, would be there with us, I couldn't be more pleased. For now, I decided to ask so that I could also be there at the location. Although I stated that it was possible for me to restore Tanaka if it was dismantled, it was a possibility that it would be dismantled to such small pieces that it was practically impossible to restore it to the original condition. For such a situation, it was probably better if I was at the scene so that I could stop them when required. But above all else, I wanted to see the technical skills of the current generation dwarves. Alright, now that it's decided, let's go. I was led by the 5 middle-aged dwarves and had to backtrack all the way to the entrance of Blutgong. When that happened, Ares and the others followed me as a matter of course, thus we looked like an odd group as the 9 of us were walking in line. Nevertheless, it seemed no one paid attention. We said through the gate that we had initially come in and returned back to the docking lot. Oh, that's right, I forgot. We haven't introduced ourselves yet. My name's Howl. 5 I'm Kurta. 6 yeah, I'm Gaversite. 7 it's Kull Erudite, nice meeting you. 8 I'm called Gersdorf. 9 okay, I've clearly understood that these guys had no intention of wanting me to remember their names. 10 as if I could remember your names if you all introduce yourselves one after another with the same appearances. Anyways, I guess it's fine if I just remembered Howl who had first started talking to me and called the rest as Dwarf B, E. Well, I could not even remember which one was B and which one was C though. Yeah, anyways, Howl, was it? If it's fine with you, can you sell me materials that you can only obtain in this country? I'm Gersdorf. Howl is on the other side. Dam.Enit, maybe I should just paint their beards right now. Every one of these guys has black beards. At least have variation in color. Graphic designers, are you being stingy with your resource and using the same graphics over and over? That was the Tsukumai that I wanted to make. Or rather, even the designs of the recycled villagers at least came with a variety in color. Anyway Howl, listen. I'm Gaversite. Howl is this guy right next to me. It's me. I really don't care which one you are. I'll appreciate it if you just consider what I just said. Previously, I had already explained that the basis of the alchemy was to trans.m.u.te one material into another. For example, trans.m.u.ting rocks into steel, then creating a golem using that steel which was trans.m.u.ted. Back in the game, there were a finite and set number of combinations and paths the players could take. Furthermore, the numbers and types were also predetermined. But it was now different. If I felt like it, I could now trans.m.u.te any form of alloy or steel. Additionally, the current location was the place most favorable to the alchemists, the country of dwarves. It was highly improbable that there were no new materials made available by them. As such, it was possible that I will be able to see super materials that I would not even be able to find back on Earth. That was what I was hoping for. Materials exclusive to this country, I'll gather them and bring them all later on. I'll appreciate it. Howls, this guy was Howl, right? Joyful answer caused my lips to curl up a little. In practice, because Tanaka was created out of cheap materials, I thought I would try and upgrade it using proper materials. Although there were raw materials back in the tower, those would be considered rare materials by the current Midgard standard. Starting from the epic grade Orichalk.U.M, Adamantine, Damascus, Mithril, and Apoitakara 11 they were each extremely powerful as a material. However, because they were all rare and limited in availability, I was hesitant in using them incessantly. I did not know exactly what I would have to deal with in the future. Notwithstanding, I knew that I should at least have to deal with the Demon King San and the G.O.Dis, thus I had a hunch that I would be forced to create strong golems. If at that time, there were not enough material because I had used them up to upgrade Takana, which was nothing more than a transportation device, it would be ludicrous. As such, the material used to upgrade Tanaka into a jet was wood steel, Damascus steel. 12 Notwithstanding that it was a fairly strong metal, it was not a very rare material back in the game. It was a material with a fairly high maximum level that the players could obtain cheaply. As a consequence, it was a perfect material in Ma.S.S producing fairly strong golems. Anyways, I thought that I would observe the dwarves researching Tanaka for a little while. They were looking overly enthusiastic about the research that they were about to conduct, thus I was worried that they would go too far if I did not stop them halfway. Author's note, Alovenus, dwarves are such a pain to create and it'll decrease my workload, so you won't mind it if I make their designs and graphics to all be the same, right? Rupas, oi. The inspection of Tanaka by the dwarves took about 3 hours to finish. Although it might have seemed like a short amount of time, it was only possible because there was alchemy involved. In that time, Dina and Libra, who went shopping, had gotten back. At this moment they were looking at Tanaka along with me in an exasperated expression. Modified, yes, we did not merely stop at inspection of Tanaka but went ahead and modified it. In the beginning, the dwarves merely dismantled Takana into smaller pieces to inspect it. However, things took a turn for the worse when I got bored and joined them. If one were to let me make an excuse, I would blame it on the fact that the Blutgong exclusive materials brought by the dwarves were of a higher standard than I was expecting. Apparently, the name of the material was called Mizar steel, and it was a new material created approximately 100 years ago and had a quality befitting of its name, containing founder of the great nation. It was a stu.r.dy, light and flexible material, and possessed an Astanis.h.I plus Ng maximum level of 400 should anyone want to create a golem out of it. It was unfortunate that there was no longer any high-level alchemist in this country which had the ability to create golems of that level cap. It was truly regrettable, as, if there were alchemists capable of such a feat in this country, its combat might would include level 400 combat golems. Needless to say, if it was me, I would be able to bring out the full potential of this material. Additionally, as I knew that it would serve as a good material should I decide to ma.s.s produce golems, I had purchased quite a fair amount of it. I had a plan to eventually combine them with the golems which were retrieved from the royal tomb and create a platoon of mid-level golems. In any event, I had decided to strengthen Takana with the Mizar steel. However, I might have taken things too far. In some moments, I was taught various things by the dwarves. And in others, I was casually teaching them various knowledge from modern-day J.A.Pan. The current Tanaka was the unfortunate consequence of that. Although the outer appearance had not changed much, the originally big Tanaka had become even bigger with the length of 15 meters and the height of 2.8 meters. It was without a doubt a size that would not be able to run on J.A.Pain's roads. Furthermore, the interior had become as luxurious as hotel rooms. In other words, using this world's standard, it was extremely luxurious. The floor was now porcelain tiles. The cabinets and walls were purposefully made using wood and varnished, giving off a brilliant and glossy look. Apparently, in this country, the varnish was normally in circulation. As such, it was a fortunate miscalculation which saved me the ha.s.sle of having to manually make things myself. We also purchased cloth, and as such carpets, sofas and beds also received improvements. If I were to turn Tanaka into an accommodation infrastructure, I would be able to fetch quite a lot of money. Not that I was going to do such a thing. This thing turned out quite nicely. Kakaka, I'm satisfied. Dwarf rangers were also laughing in satisfaction as they were looking up at Tanaka. Some they now had basic knowledge of the mechanics behind suspension and types, thus I believed it would not be long before this country was introduced to transportation golems which resembled modern-day cars. I digress, but Mizar steel and the cloth were both sold cheaply to me. It seemed it was due to the grat.I.tude for letting them inspect Tanaka. In practice, the dwarves went as far as to say, we don't mind it giving it to you for free. However, I did not feel good about that, thus I asked them to make it dirt cheap instead. Oh, by the way, Libra, did you find out the location of Karkinos? I was waiting for you to ask that question. I have already determined his location. Good, let's go there now. I had almost forgotten, but the original goal of coming to this location was to find and meet up with Karkinos as well as to stop Scorpius. Now that Libra has accurately determined Karkinos' location, it was possible for us to head to his location anytime. After saying a few words to the dwarf ranger, I followed Libra, who guided us at the front of the group. We again went through the gate and returned to the capital. After walking for a few minutes, we reached a familiar storefront. The store that we were standing in front of was the restaurant with the crab sign that caught my attention the first time we came into the capital. What a strange thing it was. It turned out Carquinez was right in front of us. Not to mention he was boldly hanging up a crab signboard. You know how I should put it. As an excuse, maybe I should say that people had small peripherals and that the harder we looked for something, the harder it was for us to spot something that was close to us. I'm sure you've heard of something like that before. Instead of trying to hide badly, it was much harder to find person that was boldly walking around in the middle of the city, you know, something like that. The current case was exactly like that. It's hard to see what is under your nose or something like that. Or rather, one would not think it would be like this. That one of the pillars of the 12 heavenly stars was opening a restaurant at a location like this. It turns out it was in front of our eyes. Yeah, it's right in front of our eyes. Dina and Agakero said to me as if they were tag teaming to attack an already defeated enemy. What the H.E.L.L, you guys did not notice it too? Well, don't mind the small things. Let's go inside first. I quickly changed the topic and hurried everyone into the restaurant. Inside, the walls and tables were made out of wood and gave off a quiet atmosphere. Nevertheless, it was not all natural, as you could see the surface S.H.I plus ning from the coat of varnish. Behind the counter stood a young man wearing a pair of GLA.S.SES. His L.U.S. True's black hair was combed all the way to the back and tied neatly, and his extremely sharp eyes, which could even be mistaken for a blade, were sitting behind a pair of GLA.S.SES. The position of his nose was high, but the overall look of his face was well proportioned. He had a fresh and high stature with his white S.H.I plus RT and tie. The vest that he wore on top of that was colored red. Finally, his slacks and shoes were colored black. Whichever angle you looked at him from, he gave off a feeling of being a good catch man. When that man saw me, he spontaneously jumped on the spot and spun around in midair, eventually hitting the ceiling and bouncing back down. After Crash.H.I plus NG in front of me with a bang, he quickly stood up and grabbed my hand with his. Oh. I was surprised. Rupa-sama-ia. You who exist here is none other than my most beloved master, Rupa's Maful-sama-ia. This guy's is a lost cause type. Even though I literally just said it, I was going to have to take back my words. He gave off a feeling of bad catch man. For some reason, he started spinning around on his spot and started scattering rose petals in the surrounding. Oh, at least. This day, who knows how long I've waited for this day. This Carquinez, ever since losing Milady that one fateful day that I couldn't forget due to the heartache, couldn't sleep at night so slept in the day, couldn't eat meals normally so had snacks, but believed that I would be able to see you so I was waiting for you. Well, surprisingly, he lived his days quite normally, oi. While I was being quite astonished by everything, the lighting inside the restaurant suddenly stopped working, or so I thought. However, a spotlight suddenly lit on Carquinez. But, me believed it. Believed that Milady wouldn't be done with something of that degree. Me believed that me would definitely be able to see Milady one day. As he said that, he put one of his hand on my waist and grabbed my hand with the other. Subsequently, he made that move you often see male dancers do for the female dancers during the social dance. What was that calling again? Was it something like drop over sway, too? But before I could come up with the answer to that question, my stance was returned back to normal, followed by Carquinez going down on his knee with my hands being pulled to his lips for a kiss. Receiving such treatment from a man gave off an eerie feeling. Rupa's dance. Congratulations on returning, my dearest master. Me would like to commemorate of this joyful occasion. Me would also like to present my love and loyalty to Milady, even though 200 years have passed. Said notwithstanding that he had reached such a point in his speech, he was cut short and was unable to complete what he was saying. The reason for that was simple. It was because Libra had stuck a blade made of light on Carquinez's neck. Hey. You was also here, Libra. It has been a while, Carquinez. Now then, I would like you to state your defense for why put your hands on master's waist without permission. Well, you know. Between you and me, can you look the other way a bit? I take it those are your final words. I have understood and accepted them. Enuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuu was then avoided by Carcanos, who took a bridge-like posture. After the initial swing by Libra, Carcanos quickly s.h.i+f'd away from the location whilst in that posture and put some distance between himself and Libra. In this small time frame, Libra had already gotten up and was moving in for her next attack. I was looking at Carcanos, who was screaming help, and running away Libra, and gave off a sigh. 12 heavenly stars. There's really no ordinary individual amongst them. 12 heavenly stars. Carcanos level, 800 species, King Crab attribute, Earth HP, 105,000 SP, 4,500 STR, Strength/Attack Power 4,850 Dex, Dexterity 2,228 VIT, Vitality 10. 503 Int, Intelligence 1180 AGI, Agility/Speed 2134 MND, Mind Power 4160 Luck 4050. Yeah, it's quite high. Looking at Carcanos's stats, I almost became astonished from his needlessly high defensive values. In this game, Vitality served as a stat to determine whether a one would be able to withstand the enemy's attack or not. In other words, it was indicative of one's defense. High Vitality equals tough body equals hard. That was how it was back in the game. In any event, Carcanos was the one with the greatest defensive ability back in the 12 heavenly stars, and these values were reflective of that. If Vitality was the only stat in question, it would even be comparable to me, who was a level 1000 player who had endlessly doped myself. Not to mention his HP was also very high. Anyways, why do you have a restaurant open in a place like this? As the game of chase between Carcanos and Libra was coming to an end, I asked a question towards Carcanos. We all sat in front of the counter, and on it there were crab soups made for us by Carcanos. The taste was certainly that of a crab. Though I wondered how Carcanos was able to get his hands on crabs in this country. Wait, no, it couldn't be that he was using himself as a cooking stock, could he? Currently, Carcanos had the appearance of a human. However, if he were to transform himself back to that of a magical beast, he would become a giant crab. The name of his species was King Crab. It was the strongest amongst the crabs, which had mutated into magical beasts and made many players suffer due to their ridiculously high defensive stat combined with envious counter skill. As such, it was not implausible to use himself as a cooking stock, but, as I was thinking about such a thing, Virgo, who was sitting amongst us, shouted out loud, "Ah, this is Barometz." Looking at the others, I saw that Ares's face had turned blue after unwittingly drinking the soup. Oi Carcanos, how could you so easily go through with such a scam? Don't say it's a crab soup and serve Barometz. Thank you for asking. After me heard that Rapasama was defeated, in preparation for the time that Milady would be back, me went around countless countries with the purpose of gathering information. But one day, me noticed that rather than go to different location myself, it would be more efficient to create a location where the information will come to me. And that was the restaurant, huh? Yes, that's right. At times, it was at Hradi, and then at Adalier, or at Svalin. Currently, it is at Blutgong. By going from country to country and opening a store here and there, I've been gathering information. Me always believed that Rapasama will return and was hoping to get news of that one day. I see, and you're telling me that while you were waiting for the news, I myself walked in. Yes, yes, yes. Me felt that is what you call destiny. As me expected, me and Rapasama are connected by a faithful red string. I thought that the idea in itself was not too bad. If anything, his only mistake would be that he chose a capital city like Blutgong, which was literally closed off from the rest of the outside world. For example, if he was based in the trade capital of Adalier, he would be able to get his information from the wandering merchants around the world and would have more quickly discovered my return and as a consequence, met up with us. What he said was not a bad idea. However, the location that he chose was detrimental. Though if I said such a thing, he would probably become depressed. As such, I decided not to do so. The location that you chose is quite bad, isn't it? If you're going to open a restaurant, you should have chosen Adalier. Notwithstanding that I chose not to say anything to Karkinos, Dina voiced it out loud quite easily. Karkinos froze up and dropped to the floor as if he just suffered from a shock. In truth, me also faintly felt like that, whilst me was in this country, was thinking there was no information about the outside. No, you should have noticed it. As expected, you're still as stupid as before, Karkinos. Towards Karkinos, who was already feeling down, Ares mercilessly followed up with a line which could easily have been a final blow. Although Ares had always been quite straightforward with the way he spoke poisonous things easily, this time, his statement was particularly toxic. In all likelihood, it was due to his anger about being tricked into eating Baromets. All these small things aside, with this, our goal of meeting up with Karkinos was fulfilled. Considering that every encounter until now was filled with some troublesome thing, this was most probably our smoothest re-encounter. It would have been perfect if only he was not such an eccentric person. It seemed among the 12 heavenly stars, the man called Karkinos was one of the individuals with better communication skill. Even after the previous event, he continued speaking with Ares, Libra, and Agakeros in a friendly manner whilst occasionally getting slashed at by Libra. Nevertheless, the place stayed in an uplifting atmosphere. Unfortunately, only Virgo, who had just recently joined the group, was unable to get into the clique. She was left looking at the others from the outside. She might have been considerate and putting effort into not interrupting the reunion, however, amongst these colorful personalities she seemed to be the only normal individual, thus she came off as being unable to blend in with them. I left the rowdy bunch of 12 heavenly stars to go and sit beside Virgo. Can't blend in. Ah, Rapasama. Virgo was sort of forcibly ordered by Parthinos to accompany us. In other words, unlike the others who had followed me out of their own wills, she was dragged away by us from what could potentially be her peaceful and serene life. As such, I was a little worried about her. I also did not wish for her to have a hard time on this journey. No, I was just wondering if it was all right for me to be here. Everyone here is such amazing people. I was just thinking that I wouldn't be of any use to anyone with how low-leveled I was. And ability-wise, I'm like a downgraded version of Dina-san. Notwithstanding that Virgo's and Dina's element affinities were different, just as Virgo stated, their positions in the group were overlapping with one another. Both were backline support types, however, as opposed to Dina, who could use both arcane magic and divine magic, Virgo could only use divine magic. Furthermore, Dina had an affinity with both the water and metal elements and came with a superior spec A.S. associated with the maximum level of 1000. To top things off, she was able to use a cheat skill such as X-Gate and render enemy long-distance attacks ineffective and create appropriate distance between herself and her enemies even though she was a rearguard, effectively allowing her to get by without the protection of the vanguard. Now that I thought about it, what was with that cheat character? Well, anyways, depending on the way she's trained, Virgo had the potential to rival Dina. Although Flugels were unable to use arcane magic, they had superior base stats, thus they stood in a perfect position to become strong backline support. Looking at things from that point of view, it could be said that Virgo's potential was more than enough to rival Dina's. There's no need to jump to such conclusion. You are a successor personally chosen by that Parthinos. You will be able to stand side by side with those guys in the near future. Would things really become like that? That's right, young girl. You shouldn't be making such a depressing face. While Virgo and I were having a conversation, a very refined and pleasant voice cut in one. At the very least, it was a voice I could not recognize. To determine where it was coming from, I turned my face towards the voice. What I saw there was an ingredient for a dish, the Baromets. A plant was growing from a flower pot. Coming out from its unnaturally big bud was the head of a sheep which was speaking to us. The magical beast can speak, huh? Oi, the lady with the black wings, you say such a strange thing. Of course, magical beasts can also speak. Even the orcs are constantly talking, yeah. Now that I thought about it, orcs were indeed speaking nonstop. Or more like, thinking about it properly, Ares and Agakeros were also magical beasts. The Baromets, which had a needlessly refined and dandy voice, continued speaking as if it was completely normal. Young girl, there's nothing to think too deeply about. There's no one that can't be of use. Whoever you are, whatever you are, you will always have a role to fulfill. There's a stage where you can S.H.I plus any. Even if there's no spotlight on you right now, there's a S.H.I plus any that only you possess. Stop undervaluing yourself. It doesn't match your cute face. For some reason, an ingredient was saying something excessively cool. I did not know why, but although the things that it was saying were correct, for some reason, it was irritating. Even I'm the same. I'm just a lame magical beast who can't even move on my own, but by being cooked and eaten, I can bring happiness to people's face. When I'm in a dish, I can S.H.I plus any. B.A. Baromeets-san. Are you even fine with that? What should I do? I did not even know where to begin retorting. Whilst I was lost on what to say and was staring at the Baromets, Karkanos, who had finished speaking with Ares, and the group came over and tightly gripped onto the Baromeets' head. Rupa-sama, in preparation for the journey, me's going to go turn the whole Baromets into smoked meat. If you don't mind, please give me some time. After saying as such, Karkanos went to the back of the kitchen. It seemed he went to create food which could be stored for our long journey. The Baromets kept saying, "Young girl, believe in your own potential," as it was being taken to the back and eventually stopped making noise. In the future, it would most probably become smoked meat and help us out. Well, it was a good guy. Yeah. All that side, Dina was awfully quiet today for some reason. It almost seemed as if she was preparing herself so that she could move any time if anything were to happen. As if she was waiting for something, no, as if she knew something was going to happen. Or was that just my intuition going on overdrive? A single woman was walking on the top of the wasteland. She was a beautiful lady which possessed a captivating style and looked to be in her early 20s. She was wearing a black bondage clothing which exposed much of her skin. On top of that, she had a similarly black coat with furs equipped. Nevertheless, she did not put her arms through that coat too. Her lips were dyed purple and on her left cheek was a tattoo with the shape of a crimson heart with black wings coming out of it. Her hair, which was tied on the top of her head, flowed all the way to her foot and the end of it was shaped like a scorpion's sting. No, it was not like a. It was truly the sting of a scorpion. The hair, which should have been soft and smooth, became harder as it neared the end, and by the end of it, completely became scorpion's sting. If one were to summarize it in a single phrase, she would be a poisonous woman. She would salt man using her seductive body whilst poisoning and eating him up. Let alone hiding that dangerous scent, she was going around and scattering them. Her name was Scorpius. She was a specialist in poison as well as one of the pillars of the tyrannical way 12 Heavenly Stars 3. Right now, in her line of sight was a steel capital created by Mizar, one of the despicable late 7 heroes, who had betrayed her master in the past. Ha, that thing looks disgusting, what a senseless capital. It's lacking in grace and elegance. Right? Don't you guys think so too? She spoke as if she was drunk or clingy. Hearing the words she spoke of were the army of thousands or tens of thousands of magical beasts. They were not the weak fodders she had borrowed from the demon race. It was an army of scorpions which were personally subdued by her. Emperor Berserk Scorpion. The T.I.Tle of an emperor which was within her name was not just for show. She was without a doubt the king amongst the scorpions. She was a pinnacle of all living things in the desert, the pinnacle of all magical beasts which had mutated out of scorpion. As such, every magical beast originating from a scorpion was her child, her subordinate and her pawn. In addition to the immense power she possessed herself, she had the army with both the quality and quant.I.T at her beck and call. Because she possessed all of that, she was able to single-handedly destroy the country of Hradi, which was founded by the late Adventure King. Rupas had misunderstood one thing. She had believed there was nothing protecting Hradi at the time. She had mistakenly believed that there was no protective system around Hradi to prevent the advancement of the demons. She had believed there was nothing like Levia protecting Svalin, nothing like the defensive field protecting Leavitian, and nothing like the demon preventative system possessed by Blutgong. She was under such misunderstanding. Wrong. She was wrong. Hradi had indeed had a defensive mechanism. It indeed had something that would not even lose to Levia. If anything, it would have been most strange for Fekta, who had the monster tamer skill, to not leave anything behind once he said away. Before he said away, he had gone through the magical beasts he tamed and left the four most powerful and excellent beasts as guardian deities. But even then, they were all annihilated. The army of scorpions trampled down the country into oblivion as it ate away all the protections left by the late Adventure King. But that thing's such an ideal prey. If they're holing up in that tiny place, the poisons will circulate really quickly. Ha, ha. I can't wait. I wonder what kind of face the dwarves will make as they suffer and drop dead. To be bleeding from every hole you can imagine. Oh, I can just imagine them trying to run away from that tight coffin, but dying with despair and misery, oh so unbearable, I'm going to wet myself. She stuck her red tongue out seductively and licked her lips. She believed it was perfectly normal for the humanoids to be suffering. If anything, she believed it was their duty to suffer and die. Because if that was not so, there will be no retribution for her master. After all, her master had given her all for the sake of the world and the humanoids, yet she was betrayed and taken down by them. Ah, there was no way she could forgive them. As such, Scorpius became crazed. By her own will, she abandoned her reasoning, ethics, morals, discipline, and self-control to become a lunatic murdering machine. To make them drown in the lake full of blood, to make them struggle and suffer. To make them scream from misery. To put them under utter despair. To make people scream from the bottom of their lungs and to make them cry so that her beloved master could hear them. Those were the only thoughts that were keeping her moving nowadays. Her master was her everything. And to be next to her master meant the world for her. Now that her master was taken away from her, she no longer had any meaning in continuing to live. As a consequence, to completely annihilate the people that took her master away became her only reason in life. It became the only way she could repay her late master. That was why she had no hesitation and felt absolutely no remorse in what she was doing. Women? Child? Infant? Elder? She could not care less about any of them. As such, she became crazed of her own choice. She allowed herself to continually be enveloped in insanity and madness. So that she could sink this world into despair, for that one and only reason. Scorpio Yandere. Her advance was also detected by those in Blutgong. If anything, there was not the slightest indication to hide it. If anyone were to bring tens of thousands of magical beasts which had mutated from scorpions, it would be natural that they were found out. In the 15th city, the highest floor of Blutgong. There, the marshal who was permitted to operate Blutgong was making a grim expression whilst looking at the outside view displayed on the monitors. The marshal indicated the highest position within Blutgong, and had the power to command every individual in the 15th city. It was the highest position with tangible power. Of course, position-wise, the royalty sat higher. However, he was entrusted with the complete power to command and control Blutgong in the time of war, and as such, would not be wrong to call him the most powerful individual in the capital. So you've come, poisonous woman. The marshal, who had a white beard, could be said to possess one of the bigger bodies amongst the dwarves and was not much different in size as compared to a human. He wore a blue military uniform and on his head was a hat with 5 ornamental stars. There was a pipe in his mouth as he continued to sit on his chair without being agitated. His name was Janelle, for although just a little, he carried the blood of royalty and was a dwarven elder of such age to have lived side by side with late Mizar. There was some nervousness. However, there was no agitation. From the very day Hradi was destroyed, he had expected that one day it would come to this. In the 15th city, there were already Type 1 battle deployments on standby and all the subordinates were sitting in their respective position. 5 Emergency transmission to all cities within Blutgong. Beginning now, Blutgong will be entering into battle against the tyrannical Way 12 Heavenly Stars Scorpius of the Scorpion. Emergency transmission received. After receiving Janelle's order, one of the subordinates put his hands on the microphone and repeatedly gave instructions out. Subsequently, those instructions were simultaneously transmitted throughout the capital and heard by all citizens within. In practice, even they themselves did not know the mechanics behind how such a thing was possible. Blutgong was created by the hands of the great Smith King, and the technology that was utilized was so advanced that even after 200 years of time, most features seemed like a black box that had yet to be made clear. We will be the one to make the initial move. Prepare to fire. Prepare to fire. Target acquired. Free. With Janelle's order as the trigger, muzzles which were coming out from all over Blutgong all fired at the same time. The shockwave shook the earth as the cannons fired in rapid succession, scattering the scorpions away. Nevertheless, the important Scorpius herself was not perturbed in the slightest and started walking forward calmly and graciously. It was not effective? No, even before the cannon could reach her, she used the sting on her hair to strike away at the cannon. A.L.L.S. It's no use, it's not working at all. Doesn't matter, continue firing. We can reduce their number. Marshal, the deployment of the Golem squad is ready. Good, send them out. Next moment, Blutgong's gates opened and a bunch of golems came out in a squad and advanced forward whilst ringing a rigid sound. The golems that were deployed were not lacking in the least, as not only the recently created models but even the high-level golems made by Mizar 200 years to serve as the Steel Guardians were sent out. The man-type golems were boarded by the dwarves who were wearing armors and advanced forward without fear. Attack! As the dwarf who was leading the squad shouted, the golem squad all accelerated forward. Steel Guardians who did know what fear was all embarked right onto the wilderness with their bodies, and advanced onto the army of magical beasts. Give them a welcome. As if to match up with the advancing golems, the scorpion army of magical beasts also advanced forward and clashed with the golems in the middle. The situation was approximately even. Neither side had the emotion called fear, thus they neither ran nor flinched. They only thought about annihilating the enemy, leading them to wholeheartedly striking the enemy down. At times they would use their allies' corpses or broken debris as a foothold as the magical beasts and golems continued to reduce the number of enemies. Charging completed. Target acquired. Target set. Firing location determined. Enemy number 600. The number of allies 100. All allies are golems. There is only a single Mizar type. All right. Artillery, fiery. If they could erase more enemies, they did not even care about the allies becoming collateral damage. Essentially, as long as there were no living dwarves, it was all fine. It was fine to remake the golems. Unfortunately, the Mizar models would not be subject to reproduction, however, they still could not hesitate because of that. They could not miss the chance because they were unwilling to trade one for 600. Just as they aimed, a lot of golems shattered into pieces, however, using that as the sacrifice, they were able to turn a lot of magical beasts into meat paste. Oh dear, involving your own allies, quite a playful bunch, aren't ya? With this, the balance S.H.I did towards Blutgong a little. However strong they were, the enemies were a gathering of magical beasts which knew neither tactics nor strategy. They believed if quality could be matched by quant.I.Ti, the side which could utilize strategy would be in an advantageous position. The way they thought was not wrong by any means. The wars were always foretold using strategy as the basis. However, they could not underestimate the enemy. The one that they were fighting was a monster which could easily overturn those strategies in a flash. That was why they were the tyrannical way. That was what they were, the 12 stars. Exactly because there was that pride, Scorpius was not agitated in the slightest. In that case, maybe I'll try playing around a little too. Scorpius's form became painted in madness. Her eyes were opened wide and her smile caused her mouth to open from one ear to another. Even her beautiful look turned ugly as she went in towards the bunch of golems. By the time one thought her hair, no, her sting moved, all the golems in the area had already been cleared away. Scorpius's true power might have been in relation to poison, however, it did not mean that her attack power was low. Especially now that she had continuously been in this state of insanity, her norm had become madness. By always been in this crazed state, her attack power had increased as a matter of fact. Needless to mention the low-level golems, her attacks could not be withstood by even the level 300 or 400 golems. Here. Her sting was swung with a speed so fast one could not even follow, and mowed down and turned one golem after another into a mere debris. In order to try and stop her by any means possible, golems were rushed onto her. Nevertheless, however many were thrown at her, the result stayed exactly the same. And from this little battle, Blutgong, which had lost many high-level golems, was plunged into a position of inferiority. As the balance was broken, the magical beasts started their attack like an avalanche, further decreasing the number of golems. Come read for free at the original source 2 more free thoughts. It did not matter who was looking at the fight. If this continued, the side which would win was as clear as black and white. Marshal. Now that it's come to this, please give the order for Blutgong to enter battle form. Rejected. Don't forget, that thing possesses poison. If we get close to her, even if we win, the citizens will die. Think of that as a loss. But what should we do? Send out the Scales Squad. They're the only things that can hold their own against her. Understood, sending out the Scales Squad. The greatest battle prowess of Blutgong was to have the Blutgong itself be on the offensive. However, for this battle, that was not a viable option. By going close to her, they would be subjected to her poison and lose the citizens within, which would signify their loss. However, the cards in Blutgong's hands were not limited to one. They possessed another trump card, the Scales Squad. Just as its name was mentioned, 4 shadowy figures charged out and took battle formation in mid-air. Scorpius looked up into the air as carefree as she could be. What she saw was the nostalgic appearance of her comrade. Belonging to the same group. The tyrannical way 12 heavenly stars, and possessing the name of the Scales, the murderous maid, Libra. And for some reason, there were 4 of her in the air looking down at the magical beasts. What? What is that? Isn't that Libra? Target acquired, commence destroying. If she looked at things properly, the color was different. Compared to Libra, who had brown hair, these 4 possessed white hairs. Besides that, however, they were no different from her comrade which existed in her memory. Furthermore, 2 of them expanded their weapons resembled the one in Scorpius's memory. The right scale, Zubin el-Janubi, fire. Tisk. Libra's main long-distance weapon, the right scale. And its destructive power was well known by Scorpius. 2 rows of ray were fired in a flash as it continued to pierce the ground, scattering many magical beasts in the process. Although Scorpius had avoided the attack instinctively, as if to strike while she was taking her time recovering, 2 fake Libras came out from the smoke. The left scale, Zububeskamali. An attack by the left arm which had been turned into a blade that could even slice through steel. Again, it was an attack that Scorpius could recall. Scorpius used her sting to intercept this as she withstood the attack. However, the second Libra quickly moved around to the side and mowed towards Scorpius with the blade. A narrow escape, the blade merely scratched the cheek before it was stopped. Nevertheless, anybody could see that managed to wound Scorpius. Although it was just a minuscule amount, a truly minimal amount, Scorpius was surprised and felt some approval towards her enemy. Ever since that fateful battle 200 years ago, the combat level of the world decreased by an unnatural extent. It was such that, by the current age, the individuals who could deal damage to her were so rare that it was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. Something like the magical beasts or the demons were out of the question completely, and if anyone could wound her, Scorpius believed they had to be those that were equal to her, such as the 12 heavenly stars, the vampire princess, the demon king, or perhaps his son. But some strange reason, she was shown that the bunch of inferior product lookalikes were able to scratch her cheek. This fact surprised her a little. She felt nostalgic. She felt that there was a threat that should normally be felt from enemies. There was such a thing on this battlefield. Enemy, insignificant damage. No change to combatability. Continuing to attack. As they said that, the 2 Libras split to the left and right, followed by a ray of light from the previous one coming straight down the middle. Although Scorpius dodged this again, the ray of light which was fired continuously for the second time broke her composure just a little. However, it was as expected of the 12 heavenly stars. Even this follow-up attack without a time lag was swept away by the sting, and she regained her composure in an instant. You don't just look alike, huh? To be able to scratch this mistress, I'm genuinely surprised at your work, you know. Scorpius swiped at the blood on her cheek with her finger and laughed as she licked that finger. I see, looks like these are Blutgong's trump card. In all likelihood, they were made by Mizar with the original Libra as the base. If it was him who had the know-how of how she was built, he'll be able to make these imitations. However, even if they were considered imitations or fakes, as long as the creator was the same, the equipment and the product could be considered real. They might have been inferior compared to the original, however, what Scorpius just saw was without a doubt the right scale and the left scale. Furthermore, Scorpius believed all fours levels were most likely to be around 700. At the very least, it was more than enough to repel the advances made by the demons. Without a shred of doubt, these were clearly the legacy left behind from 200 years ago. Scorpius could not help but understand why Blutgong had not collapsed until now. But, it's strange, right? Just then, the original will have fired Brachium, right? It's weird, right? It's odd, right? I wonder why it wasn't used. After all, wasn't that the perfect opportunity? Phew, you don't have it, right? You guys don't have your most important weapon equipped, do you? Without a doubt, Libra's greatest value came from her Brachium, which was her most fearsome weapon. An individual's resistance was irrelevant. Their attribute was irrelevant. Their skills were also irrelevant. It was a skill which made everything else irrelevant with its penetration effect and the ability to forcibly deal the maximum possible damage. It was a highest-tiered annihilation weapon. But that was a weapon which could only be made after using the scales of the G.O.Dis as the material one. It was not a weapon which could be made or reproduced by utilizing another method. These Libra lookalikes might have been made to be as close to the original as possible, however, the most important material used was different. Even if it was well created, it didn't change the fact that they were merely imitation products. They were simply inferior and degraded products which were a long way from the original. You idiots. Something like Libra without Brachium is, right, not even enough to serve as my pincers. They were a slightly annoying bunch of enemies. However, they were not enemies Scorpius had to be scared of. Scorpius had not even the slightest cloud of doubt that she would come out victorious as she swung and thrust her sting much faster than the speed of sound, skewering one of the Ma.S.S produced Libra type. Not good, A.S.Sys the Scales squad. Inside the command center of Blutgong, they were feeling the never-before-felt uneasiness. Until now, there were countless attacks by the magical beasts. There were also more than one or two advancements made by the demons. Nevertheless, Blutgong managed to overcome and repel them because they had the trump card called the Scales Squad. 4 Ma.S produced golems, created using one of the pillars of the 12 heavenly stars, the scales as the basis to even without the Brachium installed, and even though they had either one or the other of the left or right scale, they were still the level 700 highest CLA.S. Said golems. There was a sense of security in knowing everything would be fine if those girls were there. Yet right now, one of them had her body impaled without even being able to react. As a golem, this was not fatal on its own. In practice, the impaled Ma.S produced model continued to fight despite having a hole in the stomach area. Nevertheless, it was clear that the tides were S.H.I plus fting in the Scorpion S direction. We cannot, sir. If we fire carelessly, we will hit the Ma.S produced Libra model. S.H.I plus, why are they getting overwhelmed? Even if they're Ma.S produced models, they're level 700. And there's 4 of them. Let alone a fair match, it wouldn't be strange for us to be the one to overwhelm her instead. Level-wise, this fight was definitely not disadvantageous for them. They had no way to know that Scorpion had Serpa.S. set her limits and had become level 900, nevertheless, she was not an enemy that they would not be able to overcome. But in actuality, they were being overwhelmed. The Scale Squad was being pushed back by the Scorpion S fierce attacks. The reason for that was because of a match in the attributes. The Scale Squad, or rather, Golem's attribute were fundamentally determined by the material they are constructed from. Additionally, as most of the strong golems are created out of metal, thus their attributes subsequently became metal. On the other hand, Scorpion's attribute was fire. In the past, during the battle at Svalin, the guardian deity Levia showed that it was possible to fight on equal footing against Ares, who outclassed Set itself, due to the elemental affinity advantage. Although Levia was a cheat golem in that the material which it was created from was itself, thus it was able to show strength which was well above its level. But this time, it was the opposite. The one in the higher position also had an advantage in terms of the elemental affinity. Consequently, the Scale Squad was in an unfavorable situation. Furthermore, the state of affairs did not stop there. Marshal. What is it? We have another problem. We have detected many high magical powers in the first city. We've determined that the demons have infiltrated. What did you say? Asterisk, it's gotten quite rowdy, huh? I opened the restaurant's door and surveyed outside. From just a moment ago, the outside had gotten noisy with the sound resembling a cannon, or more like, they must have been really firing cannons somewhere. There were countless sound of explosions ringing. Fortunately, I had already found out what was happening. There was no way I could have missed what was happening as they had kindly broadcasted the event with a sound loud enough to be heard all across Blutgong. It seemed the Scorpius had come attacking and Blutgong had started fighting against her. Notwithstanding, when I said rowdy, I was not only talking about that. Yeah. Really, they show up everywhere, those guys. To my words, Dina responded and ran her line of sight to a distance. In the place where she looked at, there was a bunch of greenish or bluish skin things flying around like they owned the place. Well, what I'm trying to say was that there were a bunch of demons who had overtaken the place. I already knew that Scorpius was working with the demons, thus it was not a sight that was very surprising. However, for them to be able to come inside so easily, I could not help but say it was a little concerning. They probably hid and waited for the time the golems were dispatched and came in from where the golems were dispatched. This moon arcane magic power. Luna, huh? As Libra deduced how they were able to infiltrate, Agakeros muttered a name that I had not heard before. It seemed they were acquainted with him, however, I could not recall that name. Luna. It's the one amongst the 7 luminaries who possesses the T.I.Tle of moon. This individual specializes in hiding themselves within the shadow and A.S.S.A.S.Cinating or disturbing the enemy. From the sound of the name, it sounds like a woman. In all likelihood, that is correct. They always dresses as a man, however, from my observation that was a woman. In response to Agakeros's words, I frowned. A woman. I did not feel like I wanted to actively go and attack the enemy. Nevertheless, leaving the enemy alone was out of the question. It was because the enemy specialized in A.S.S.A.S.Cination, that on its own meant that the enemy was far more troublesome as compared to the other 7 luminaries. Even if the level was low, there was still a way to fight. Even if they continued to avoid fighting with those that were strong, as long as they could hunt down the all-important target, they were deemed to have shown a result. Any idiot who squirmed around like an idiot, Mars, thinking that their own level was great and comes attacking from the front in a simple manner could easily be overcome with pure fighting prowess. However, if the enemy hides within the shadow, even if one could easily overpower them through the sheer difference in level, one could end up having a rug swept away from underneath their feet. As a consequence, there was a need to either capture or remove this enemy first. Agakeros, since you're able to figure out who they are from their magical power, IA.S.Sum, you can also find their location. It can easily be done. Good, then you are to capture this Luna or whatever. If possible, I want you to capture it alive. However, I forbid you to unnecessarily involve and destroy the surrounding. Don't turn the citizens into collateral damage as well. As you wish. After I ordered him, Agakeros disappeared from his spot just like a mist. With this, the problem with the 7 luminaries should be sorted out one way or another. If it was Agakeros, there was no chance that he would lose. The problem was who would deal with the demons who had infiltrated into Blutgong. Furthermore, I also had to find out who I needed to send against Scorpius. Should I go myself? If I did that, Scorpius would most probably stop. I guess I'll take Dina with me too. She's a double spy against the demons, thus it's probably easier for her to fight if she goes outside where there are no demons. The matter of the demons who had gotten inside will be dealt by Aries and Libra. Virgo will. I suppose she will come with me. It's a good opportunity. I suppose I'll take her power leveling against the army of magical beasts. Lastly, I guess I'll take Karkinos with me too. Dina, Virgo, and Karkinos, you will come with me. We're going to go stop Scorpius. Aries and Libra, you are to stay inside and stop the demons. I gave my orders to the remaining members and quickly left the place. Dina quickly followed after me as Libra and Aries started running towards the other direction. One of the 7 luminaries, Luna of the Moon. Bluish-white skin characteristic of the race, a gold-colored pupil with vertical iris and honey-colored hair. That was the young boys, no, young girls' characteristics. Amongst the 7 luminaries, she was the one was most specialized in A.S.S.A.S.Synation. It was not as if she could not directly fight with her enemies. However, someone that stood above her, the Demon King's son, had strictly ordered her to avoid directly fighting with the enemies. But she felt disgruntled by that order. She felt that she was not trusted and that she was being underestimated. As such, she figured that she would prove him wrong. This was also the reason she had riled Scorpius up and advanced towards Blutgong. I'm not weak. I can also do things outside of A.S.S.A.S.Synation. That was what she wanted to prove. However, looking at the results, it could be said that she had recklessly jumped the gun. At the very least, now that they had determined that Rapazmoffel had resurrected, she should have been more cautious in her actions. After all, Mars's and Jupiter's deaths were the result of them being unable to exercise such caution. As such, she should have reflected on those and heavily exercised the much required caution. She should have understood that she could not continue to think of herself as the strong. Something is tailing me. By having Scorpius become the bait, they were able to have gained great initial result by easily infiltrating into Blutgong. However, there was an eerie and uncomfortable feeling since the moment she entered, as if she was being observed by something. Blutgong's command center? No, those guys would not have such leisure. Ma.S.S produced golems? No, those overwhelmingly annoying battle prowess would all have been sent towards Scorpius. Then who could it be? Something that gave off a clingy feeling. Someone that continuously released this atmosphere. She could feel their line of sight, however, she could not find their body whatsoever. There was not even a shadow. Nevertheless, there was certainly a feeling of presence that was closing in on her. Shadow. It can't be. There was not even a shadow, so Luna pondered. But if that wasn't it, what else could it be? What if it was a shadow itself? The moment she reached that answer, her shadow on the ground, which was running along with Luna, warped. She instantly felt her back tingle and her spine cool down. Ignoring all her reason and mental walls, she was forcibly made to feel fear, which was slammed straight within her heart. The warped form was a devil in the truest sense. It had 2 horns growing out of it, had the face of the goat and the body of a man, and with the wings of the bat, it was a figure of a devil straight out of myth. Hi! As she instinctively jumped back, the shadow on the ground released a ray of black light, striking past her. To be able to avoid the initial attack was without a doubt due to her good luck. However, even if she were to use all the luck she had on the spot, the devil was not such an enemy that she could deal somehow. From inside the shadow, an air which gave off the feeling of all sinister things in the world started flowing out. The surrounding views distorted and Luna was made to feel that S.P.A.C around her had gotten dark. So you dodged, so pitiful. If you lost your consciousness without knowing anything, you would have at least avoided feeling despair. Luna, whose body was instinctively screaming to collapse, desperately and frantically kept herself up. To make a sound, that was all there was to it. Notwithstanding, her soul was disrupted and her sanity was pressured. It was as if someone was scratching the GLA.S.S with their nails right next to her ear. She felt such a torturous feeling. It was as if the words themselves were cursed, the feeling of uneasiness just by merely existing. The feeling of disgust. Fear possessed by every person was forcibly turned into a tangible form. Symbol of such sinister. That was what this devil was. Ego, Kuros. Come read for free at the original source. 2 more free thoughts. Luna, Week 1. I shall now bestow upon you 2 paths. 3 eyes that were like a void shone ominously. Just from that alone, Luna's legs shook uncontrollably and disgracefully. 1 is sweet surrender. If you do not resist, you shall get away without getting hurt. I shall take you as an offering to present to my great master. Haha, that's a wonderful suggestion. Are you telling me to be killed by Rupasmafel without resisting? That's right. An existence so insignificant like yourself, something no different from a bug, is able to die by the hand of my master. That is an honor. Rupasmafel shows no mercy to the demons. That was something even a child knew about. If you entered her sight, it signified your end. Whether you were a woman or an elder, she would hunt you down to the end of H.E.L.L. and kill you, subsequently hanging your head to the environment. That was the existence called the Black-Winged Supreme Ruler. In other words, to surrender here directly signified death. 1 is merciless submission. I shall remove your 4 limbs and present your bloodied self to my master as an offering. Both are exactly the same. Affirmative. To die after surrendering, or to resist and die pitifully, now choose, a Week 1. The devil mercilessly handed down her death sentence. That on its own, signified and bared the difference in the ability between the 2.